Welcome to the Times of India webinar on demystifying the Indian electoral process and exploring remote voting. My name is Sujit John, and I have with me my colleague Shilpa Fadnis. The two of us will moderate this discussion. A little over a year ago, in the run-up to the last general elections, the Times of India pioneered the Lost Votes initiative. Many Indians are unable to vote in elections because they are on the move for work or education and are not where they are registered as voters. Today, given the COVID environment, existing electoral practices seem particularly difficult. Can we find a technology solution to this? Towards this, the Times of India is hosting a Lost Votes Tech Challenge in association with IBM and GitHub. India has fantastic tech talent. They are the ones who built Aadhaar and UPI. Aadhaar and UPI are technology solutions that serve over 1 billion people and which are unique to the world. Many countries want to learn from us on how to build such systems. Many of the largest banks in the world have massive technology centers in India. You know why? One of the big reasons is we know better than anyone else how to build many of the systems that these banks and financial institutions require. India has UPI. India does everything on mobile phones, and that's the direction the rest of the world wants to take. So can we do something similar in our electoral arena? We are the biggest democracy in the world. We have among the best software talent in the world. So we should work towards a digital voting system. QI has already received over 1,000 registrations for the Lost Votes Tech Challenge. Ideas and source code need to be submitted by November 3rd. Some 15 or so ideas will be shortlisted. They will be mentored, and the shortlisted ones will be mentored. And finally, the 3 best ideas will receive cash prizes, and the best one will be presented to the Election Commission. Today, to help you, and especially the participants in the Tech Challenge, understand India's election environment, to help you get a sense of what you should be building for, we are very happy to have with us Deputy Election Commissioner, Mr. Ashish Kundra. Welcome, Mr. Kundra.
Thank you.
Those who are viewing this can send in questions through the chat box. Shilpa and I will put them to Mr. Kundra. Let me start by requesting Mr. Kundra to give us a sense of the scale of voting that happens in India in the general election and state elections. And what is your sense of the number of people who are unable to vote because they are on the move or have moved out briefly from where they are registered to vote? Mr. Kundra?
Yeah, so, we have got something like 92 crore people who are registered voters in the country, more than 92 crores. And a large number of them, as you've said, we don't know, it's not quantified anywhere as such that how many are residing elsewhere from their place of registration per se. But evidently, there are a large number of people, whether they are migrants or whether they are students or whether they are patients or whether people who have professionals who have moved elsewhere for work temporarily and for short duration assignments, people who are engaged in essential services who are unable to exercise a franchise. It is an issue which has been of concern in Election Commission on how to make them part of the electoral process to have their voice heard.
Okay, and you've been taking some efforts yourself in that direction. So how is that progressing, and what are the challenges that you stumbled into?
Yeah, so, the current construct of election is tied to a constituency and tied to a polling station. So typically, you are registered, your name is figuring in a geographical bound of a polling station and obviously a constituency of which it is a part. If we have to kind of think of a system where, supposing I belong to Delhi and I want to vote for Delhi elections from Bombay, let us say. What does it entail? If I have to vote on a device, which is, let us say, an EVM, which is currently used, I would not be able to do so from Bombay because the ballot paper, which is affixed in the EVM, is of a particular constituency. So if I was to extrapolate the problem for a general election, it means that 500 plus constituencies, anybody could come to a polling booth and should be able to cast his ballot. So therefore, we need some dynamism in the device itself, that it should be able to, based on certain authentications, pull out the ballot which is relevant to the voter. So it should not be perhaps a fixed ballot. We are talking here about a dynamic kind of a ballot paper, which can be generated by that device. That is one possible solution. Now, as you're aware that for service voters is one category where technology has been used already. And earlier there was a system where votes used to be sent to people of the armed forces who are positioned all across the country, who keep on moving by way of postal ballot. So postal ballot is sent and received, but now there is a new system called electronically transmitted postal ballot. So we transmit ballots through a mechanism which has been defined through their setups, and the ballot is then downloaded at their end by authorized officers, and the printouts are given to them. They cast their votes and we receive ballots. So that is another way of looking at it. So as I said, multiple solutions are possible, but if we are talking of a device-based solution, I gave you the constraint which I flagged earlier about having a dynamic ballot paper.
Okay. What are other possible scenarios? What are the possible ways in which this can be done, you think?
So I want to leapfrog from where you are right now, right? So can you hear me?
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yeah, there was a problem briefly,
so
but it's
if
okay.
You have to leapfrog technologically, yeah. So if we have to leapfrog technologically, we would talk of a new age EVM, let us say, which is capable of talking to a network and a secure network. So we are not talking about voting from home. That is certainly not a solution. I mean, some countries might try it. Some people might even suggest it, that why can't people use their mobile devices to vote, for instance. But then there are issues of secrecy of ballot, right? And how is it that you ensure people are not voting under duress or for some consideration? There is a fundamental issue there on that front. So therefore, the basic construct of voting from a designated location is something which is sacrosanct. So, so in designated locations, supposing we're talking about a network-based solution, we would therefore have the device talk to a network. Then there is the question of inspiring trust amongst stakeholders, that the ballot the vote which has been cast is recorded as cast. The vote which is recorded is transmitted as recorded, and the vote which is stored wherever it is stored is in a way true to what was pressed on the machine. So, of course, I would say that we are living in an age where billions of dollars of transactions are happening on networks. People trust networks with their money, so why can't they trust the network with their vote? So I think it's a mental construct which we have to overcome, and yes, it is not an easy task. And naturally, in a solution of this nature, communication is going to be an extremely important pillar. And I'm happy that all of you are taking this initiative yourself to kind of start a dialogue with the right set of people on this front.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. I never thought about this, that it has to be at a designated location. Like you said, yeah, the secrecy issue, that, yeah, something is not happening because of some pressure or consideration. Okay, I think that probably gives a good idea for people who are looking at this, that they have to have a designated location. It cannot just be a mobile phone that you are using. So inspiring trust. I just wanted to understand, EVMs also, every now and then you hear some differences, people saying, questioning it and all, but you think it's Actually, a minimal number. I mean, it's not a very serious concern. I mean, like you said, I mean, all of us trust networks now for our money. So why
No,
not?
see, no. So, in as far as the electronic voting machines are concerned, the Chief Election Commissioner is on record to say that it is an electronic gadget, just like your phone, right? And it is liable to be become non-functional, which means a machine like any other machine can become non-functional. But if somebody is trying to impute that the election machinery or for some other consideration is manipulating the machines, I think it's a false narrative which has
Okay.
been built, and I think it's the loser's narrative which has been built.
Okay.
And if that were the case, how is it that governments are changing around the world, around the country, periodically? It would the
Yeah.
same party then should be in power all over, right? So that I think it's a meaningless argument that we're talking about here.
Okay. Okay. So trust building, you think will happen? I mean, there is enough trust in technology now.
Yeah. So as I said, earlier that we have enough robust networks which are in place. We have various levels of security on those networks which are in place, which allow people to be able to trust them for very, very high value transactions. And it's not just companies who are doing it for e-commerce, but it is individuals. People, after all, use Amazon all the time, right? For ordering something as small as
Exactly.
ordering a book, or it
Exactly.
could be something very high value as well. People use net banking all the time.
Absolutely.
So I think, as I said, we have to build the right narrative and to be sure that yes, networks are secure networks, and whatever is recorded on the machine is truly reflected in the database wherever it's going.
Okay. Okay. Shilpa?
Do you think an Aadhaar-linked electoral voting system is a reality in the near future?
I think that is certainly a matter which has been deliberated upon for a long time now and is under serious consideration. Whenever that happens, it will be a very progressive step, and we certainly support that move, because a lot of challenges get addressed there in terms of authentication, deduplication, and use of biometrics for authentication, so on and so forth.
So for authentication, is there any other alternative? Or what are the other
Yeah,
possibilities?
so the alternative is that these days you use like QR code, which are encrypted QR codes.
Okay.
So you can, for example, when we issue photo voter slips to people, when people go for to the booth, that can have encrypted QR code, which can be scanned only by the authorized device, and to make sure that the right person is coming at that place to cast his vote.
Okay. 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 Shilpa?
Yeah. So if you look at authenticity, verifiability, and auditability of the entire voting framework, where do you see the maximum challenges coming across? Because is there a track and trace mechanism where there are gaps, and how you plan to plug those gaps?
You mean in the current setup?
So, yeah, current setup. Yeah.
Yeah, so now with the introduction of the voter verifiable for audit trail VVPAT machine, which is being used in the booths, and for each constituency, as per the court order, now five VVPAT are counted, and they are kind of matched with the EVM count. And the last elections have shown that there was a perfect match, and wherever one or two cases where there was, let us say, a case of a discrepancy, it was only because of a technical challenge. But otherwise, it only goes on to show that the machine is recording faithfully what the voter is actually, whosoever the voter is actually voting for.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. We have with us Mr. Chandra Bhushan Kumar as well. Welcome, Mr. Kumar. I think he's just joined us.
Friends, unfortunately, tied up with current elections which are happening in the country.
Okay, Bihar.
So
Okay.
I have to adjust accordingly, because this is the peak time generally for us, because a lot of things would have happened on the ground. So naturally, you're required to respond to a lot of situations.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's why
yeah.
this is the time.
Okay, okay. What is your sense, Bihar, because of COVID and all that? You think how will think it'll all happen smoothly? People will turn out?
You are on the ground more than us, I think,
Okay.
and you are in a better position to judge. Our task is to make an effort as desired by commission, and accordingly we put in all those things in place which create that kind of conducive environment even in the challenging times, so that voters feel safe to come out and vote. And you would have seen on the ground, today we had a particular type of elections in Bihar, which is called graduate constituency and teachers constituencies election, which was spread over almost 80% of Bihar.
Okay.
And yes, so it's a close to 1,000 booths we had the voting. And so without any hiccups, since you, I think from your expression, I can understand that you were not able even to notice that particular situation. So it means it's a kind of a smooth, flawless transition on the ground.
Okay. So it was all physically distanced and all of that.
Yes.
Everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, not a problem. Everything went off smoothly. Okay, wonderful. Okay. So what is your sense in now pandemic, of course, as we said at the introduction, Times of India is trying to, I mean, I know, we know that the Election Commission has also initiated a technology platform that they are trying to look at. Times of India has also launched this challenge, this generally asking all our technology guys to see if they can develop something that can be presented to you. What is your sense in this environment, particularly, and the kind of pandemic kind of environments, this technology solutions are becoming very important? What do you think?
I think for that expert is my colleague, Mr. Ashish Kundra, who handles this whole gamut of information technology and communication and technology. And
yeah, so I think
he's deeply involved also. So he's a
yeah.
he's a better
he's been
position
telling
to.
us. Yeah, he gave us some pretty interesting insights.
No, I think, technology penetration in election has increased enormously over the years. And it is not just because of the pandemic, but otherwise also, starting from the management of electoral roll to the conduct of elections, which happens on, let's say, electronic voting machines, compilation of results, capturing voter turnout. All of that is happening on some kind of technology platforms or the other. Similarly, we have got other applications which kind of flag violations of model code of conduct. If people see citizens on ground, if they see that there is, let us say, some distribution of money or liquor or people, some posters, banners, which are not authorized, they can click a picture, take a video, and post it along with the GPS coordinates on our C-Vigil application, which are also linking the mobile units which are there for enforcement. And it's all the observers, election observers and the returning officers, they are able to track the movement real time of all these people who are moving. So as I said, technology intensity has increased enormously, but yeah, remote voting is something which is the next level of challenge which we are trying to address and see how best we can arrive at an agreeable solution.
Okay. Shilpa, some questions coming in?
Yes, we have some questions. This is from Gaurang Gupta. What is the role of Form 6 in helping resolving migration voting?
I think Mr. Chandra Bhushan Kumar can.
I can attempt that particular question. Form 6 is the form for inclusion in the voter list. And this particular form, wherever, if you are a new voter, you want to be coming into the electoral system of the country, then you apply through this particular form. If you move from one constituency to another constituency in the country, irrespective of a state or cities or something like that, Then again, this particular form is used for shifting to a new location, new AC, assembly constituency. Actually, our roles are maintained assembly constituency wise, because we have a territorial construct of our whole electoral system, and parliamentary constituencies are composition of select assembly constituencies. So this is Form 6, which facilitates you. And in the new location, if you are already an elector, then when you apply at the new location, then naturally you need to disclose your previous electoral entry, because then the tracking is possible. If you don't mention, then it cannot track automatically unless you disclose that. So onus is on the elector, existing elector, to disclose about the previous entries at present. And then at the previous location, then the process is followed for deletion. Remember that the deletion is generally the last resort, and that's why it is considered that you should go for extra care. And so processes are defined that how it has to be. It's a quasi-judicial process, and then only a deletion can be allowed, because a deletion is just something erroneous deletion may lead to a kind of extinguishing of franchise right in that sense. So this is Form 6 arrangement in that sense.
Okay. There's a question, something similar we had already discussed with Mr. Kundra, but let me put this to you, Mr. Kumar. This is from Shwetank. How do you think, what do you think will be the social acceptance for a tech solution? We've seen in the past that there was opposition to EVMs. We already discussed that briefly with Mr. Kundra, but what is your view, Mr. Kumar?
Any technological solution always comes with that particular challenge. If we look at the history of EVM, it's a very fascinating history in the contemporary contemporary times, when you can look at that commission at that time in 1970s, late 70s, decided to experiment with this new technology. And in 1982, without having the statutory backing, with the support of some of the stakeholders, it was introduced also. And but at the level of Honorable Supreme Court, it was struck down, that particular by-election. And then Parliament in 89, they brought the law to facilitate this, because they realized the value in this particular system. Even after 89, Commission moved very cautiously, because see, diffusion of any technology takes a huge time. We require patience for that. It's not that easy. You need to also realize that election in last 7 decades in this country has been conducted time and again periodically, for which all of us as citizens of the country should be proud of. And this has happened because we have taken care of all those issues connected to that particular technology. It's a very important. Then acceptability enhances. And it takes time, because you are addressing a different kind of level. It's a multi-dimensional in a manner. So you are having a rural area, you are having hilly terrain, you have penetration of technology issue, you have understanding of a particular technology at different level, different age cohort. So you have to address all these, because all of them are equal. Everyone has one vote. That is the principle which we have in our constitution. And so we need to take care of all these things when we look at any technological solution.
Right. Shilpa?
Yeah, we have this question from Suresh Pala. Aadhaar-based schemes are being put in place by the government already. We are using this to create bank accounts, etc. Are there any issues with extending this infrastructure of e-voting to the e-voting process?
Kind of.
I think again,
Yeah.
Mr. Chandra Bhushan Kumar, yeah.
See, Aadhaar, the use of Aadhaar, as you would have known this particular thing through media reports also, that Commission has already suggested this as a statutory amendment in the law, because that is important to use Aadhaar for the purposes of our electoral roll. And this is in the pipeline in that sense, because from Commission side, it has moved. Whenever that takes place, then naturally we look at that option, because when we look at the use of Aadhaar, then it's a two aspects in this particular. One is related to electoral roll entry, identification, deduplication, a lot of issues related to that particular entry. Another aspect which may be very useful to explore would be, which is actually Ashish can throw more light on that particular aspect, is basically because when identity you acquire, uniqueness of identity, if it is acquired, then facilitating voting, conduct of election issue can be explored in much better manner in that sense. So this is a kind of thing which is work in progress at present, because amendment in law, that is one area. The exploration of technology already would have been briefed by our colleagues. So we are moving parallelly on these issues, and therefore.
Okay. There's this question from Anubhav Tyagi. Firstly, thanks for your services. Wanted to know if the EC is tracking and following the best practices and examples of other countries which might have experimented on remote voting. I'm sure you have, but can you give us some examples of what has been done elsewhere?
Yeah, so, we had this webinar which we organized recently, about 3 weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, which was on the use of one particular blockchain technology for remote voting. And where it was like a global conference, went on for 8-9 hours, and we had participants from around the world. So in that sense, this particular technology has been used in Estonia, which is a very, let us say, small country, but also relatively advanced. In some case of Russia, it has been used as well. But on the whole, and I think one more African country was there where it was used. But on the whole, on a large scale, election management bodies have been conservative in using technology for voting. Even if you see in United States, it is not been deployed, although they are the technology leaders of the world. But that should not be a deterrent for us, in a sense, because let us say in electronic voting machines, if India was a pioneer, perhaps in remote voting also we can aspire to be pioneers. After all, being the largest democracy of the world, we have to set the benchmark and not follow one.
Compared to Estonia, what would India need? I mean, Asia scale, that will make the whole software architecture very different, is it?
Yeah, so, the challenge as I was mentioning to you, is they have gone ahead with another level of advancement in which they use mobiles, etc. for voting. As I said, we are not contemplating that. So it is on fixed locations. And naturally, the scale of using technology and the complexity of design here will be much more, given the large number of constituencies. I mean, for example, right now, look at Bihar. I mean, nearly 250 assembly constituencies are going for vote. So if a solution has to be found only for one assembly at one time, it means you have to allow that kind of flexibility. So the complexity of design is far more for a scale up. So demonstrating a technology in a laboratory for one constituency is an easy proposition, but a scale up nationwide of a country the size of India is a huge challenge.
Okay. Shilpa?
Yeah, we have this question from Devdutt Pandya. How will the technology reach out to rural areas? Will there be any programs to educate the voters on using technology?
Yeah, so I mean, this is again let us say, a block which we tend to have that the rural people are not tech friendly. But if you look at the usage of or penetration of Facebook, the penetration of WhatsApp, the use of social media, and the kind of people who are using it, you'll be surprised. I mean, even in urban areas, it is the cobblers, the drivers, the chowkidars, the maids, all of them are using WhatsApp and watching videos on YouTube. So if they can do that, certainly that part of using technology is not a challenge per se, but naturally you'll have to train them, educate them, and all of that. But in a scenario of remote voting, perhaps it is not to suggest that you will set up centers in each village of the country, but naturally you start with centers where the connectivity is good, number one. So the constraint is connectivity, right? Because we are talking about network connectivity. So we start where we are sure that yes, connectivity is not a boundary.
Okay. This is an interesting question. I didn't know this. This is from Kishan. In the elections for the Hyderabad Municipal Corporation, the Telangana SEC has announced plans for remote voting for senior citizens. Do you have insights on the technology aspect of it?
Yeah, so that is an initiative which was done which is being done rather by the State Election Commission of that state. We have not had occasion to have a direct interface with them, but I was informed that it is for, as you were saying, for senior citizens and perhaps using some kind of a mobile application. But for a national election, as I said, a mobile-based solution is not on the cards at all. It's not on the table.
You're ruling that out completely. No
Yeah.
chance. Okay. Okay. Shilpa?
Yeah, this question is from Reema Khatri. Can you please tell us about the digital platforms which we can use to share violations of online code of conduct?
Yeah, so there is a C-Vigil application. It is you can download it on the Google Play Store or your Apple Store, and it's a very user-friendly application. So you just have to click a photo or a video and upload it, and it automatically takes your GPS location. And then there are teams which have been which are geographically spread out, which have to reach in that location in a defined time and resolve this way or that way in 100 minutes. In fact, we say they have to do it.
Okay. Just one interest. Have you done any estimate if this entire thing moves as a digital voting system? Does it dramatically reduce the cost of doing an election?
Well, I mean, right now we are talking only about a certain segment of voters. And we are not saying it is going to replace the existing EVM-based voting. So to that extent, I think it is premature to talk about the costs of it. But yes, I mean, if we are looking at it on a scale up, then possible. But it's too premature to talk about it, honestly.
Okay, okay. But technology should reduce, I guess, is it?
Well, as I said, that this is a very minuscule proportion of the whole data set that we're talking about.
Okay.
So it's not as if it's going to be rolled out in all constituencies and replace the EVM-based voting. That is going to continue as it is. It is only for people, or we are envisaging providing a solution for people who are otherwise unable to vote.
Okay.
So that will not be a fair comparison.
Okay. Mr. Bhushan, this is a question for you. Do you see any resistance? We kind of discussed this previously, but do you see any resistance from the political parties about a tech solution? If yes, how to reassure political parties?
It's not that easy black and white kind of situation that political parties always kind of thing have cooperated. In fact, EVM is the best example in that sense, that it has come up to this level in last 40 years. It has a history of 40 years, which people can write and experts can work upon that. a generation of political parties and stalwarts, they have always supported those kinds of advancement, which eases the process of election, basically, in that sense. And so I would not like to put it in that sense. Occasional, always you would have seen those situations would be emerging, but that may be because of different compulsions and all those things. And commission, whenever commission takes any kind of decision and all those things, basically it's always a consultative process, because the commission involves best of the brains in the technical brain, whichever is available in the country to use for these technical solutions. And lot of application like C-Visil, it's a new entry in the system, and how popular in on ground these systems, because it empowers the people, and everybody is happy with these kind of things.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, everybody wants free, fair elections.
Okay. That question was from Vivek Kumar. For my interest, in the US, what do you think is happening? Why are they so resistant? Do you have any insights?
Resistant in what sense?
No, US still hasn't progressed much on the electronic side. Any idea why?
It's not fair to comment in that sense, because see, we need to understand that election, how it has evolved in last close to 2 centuries in that country, and then you will realize that it's a territory which is the key. Unfortunately, technology empowers you to look at everything in unified system, but which is not the correct, which is not the only way of looking at. Sorry,
Okay.
it's of elections, so a lot of input will be crossing. But again, as I was telling that this in US itself, you will realize that some of the states are using technology as base for even EVM kind of things. Some of the states are still having the olden ways of dealing with balloting system and all those things, because there the states are the main, in fact, the fulcrum of the whole thing. So every state has a different kind of law related to even voting age. The voting method, they have their own, so they are empowered to do that. So it has a different kind of ideology which works in a particular nation.
Okay.
And every nation has its own way of devising. And in election, I think all of you can look at last 70 years of history, then everybody should feel proud of that, our electoral history.
Absolutely. Shilpa?
Yeah, this question is from Rajiv Tatkar. As elections across the country are not held on the same day, if we have a remote polling station, won't it be costlier as compared to now?
No, as I said that I don't see why somebody is saying it is costlier, because for a variety of reasons, which it will be difficult for me to kind of summarize that why it is. In fact, to that extent, it could be cheaper because the machines are having dynamic balloting facility, which means they can be used elsewhere, and you don't need to create so much of inventory of machines for that purpose. But as I said, it is for a very small segment of the population that we are talking about, creating this facility. It'll be, and at this juncture for me to actually comment on the cost comparison is not a fair thing to do.
Mr. Kundra, I mean, for somebody who's participating in this, scalability very important, security very important, trustworthiness, being able to authenticate and also trace back and all that. That's very important. Anything else that you think they should have in mind when they work on a solution?
Yeah, so I imagine your challenge is open to application software developers, or
yes,
or is it
I mean,
hardware?
it's open to anybody.
No, are they hardware solutions or are they application software solutions?
Well, now it's actually a mix. I mean, they left it very open to let them decide. I mean, actually, IBM and GitHub made this point specifically. They don't want to pressurize anybody or put some limitations. They just wanted to keep it all very open and
yeah. Okay. So let me put it this way: in terms of defining a problem, the question of trust is fundamental to elections. In the eyes of the voter and in the eyes of the political parties, that it is a fair election. And the current setup, you have the polled machines, the EVMs, which go to a strong room where they are stored and sealed, and political parties witness that. It's unsealed and then it's counted and all of that in front of their agents. So if you're talking about an encrypted ballot traveling on a network, it is an invisible entity which is traveling on a network and residing on a data center, which is also somewhere else. So in order to inspire the trust in this framework is a problem, right? It's a question mark. How do you inspire trust that there is data sanctity which is there? So one of the solutions again is probably use of distributed ledger technology, where multiple stakeholders, multiple nodes have access to the same data, and there is immutability of data which is maintained in multiple nodes at the same time. So as I said, trust is for us fundamental, because that is what defines the election process.
Absolutely.
Immutability of ballot is another that we are very concerned about. Security of network is equally crucial in terms of public perception. While we know that, as I mentioned earlier, that so many banking transactions are happening, but for us to be able to tell people that yes, whatever you have voted is traveling on a secure network, residing securely wherever it is, will be opened only when by authorized people, only at the right time when it is supposed to be opened, is the question. And then, of course, auditability of voting. Then, of course, you move backwards. Then there are issues of authentication and so on and so forth, which need to be addressed. And to all of that, doing it to scale for so many constituencies. So potentially in one polling station, you could talk about so many people from so many constituencies coming to cast a ballot. Right?
Yeah, I know. Massive challenge. Yeah. Shilpa?
Yeah, this question is from Anik Das. Electronically transmitted postal ballot system for armed forces was introduced in 2019 general elections. How successful was that?
Yeah, I would say it was hugely successful because earlier, as I was telling you, that the ballots would be sent by post. So there was a delay in even the ballots reaching the right places. And then they would have to, mark the ballots and send it back, and they have to reach back in a certain time frame, which again would be very difficult to beat that timeline. So hardly 5% of people, of armed forces people, would be able to actually get their voice recorded in the voting exercise. But after this electronically transmitted postal ballot has been introduced, in the last Lok Sabha election, it was close to 70% of the armed forces who were able to cast their vote because of this single step.
Okay. There's this question from Satvik. What are the constraints in using satellite/4G communication for connecting the voting machines and implementing the tech solution? Kind of mentioned it, but...
Yeah, the network design and network architecture could have multiple variants. And you can't have one network which will naturally be used, and there will be a planning for a redundancy or a fallback in case that fails. But as I said, sending data on an open network on internet is not what we're talking about. We're talking perhaps about a virtual private network, where we are able to kind of send encrypted data on the network. So that is part of the problem. Designing an appropriate virtual private network is in itself a problem.
Okay.
One of the blocks of the whole problem.
Okay. For trust, you think blockchain is going to be, you think that's the way to go about it, is it?
No, see, blockchain is based on distributed ledger
Distributed.
technology. That's
Okay.
what I said. So, firstly, it's again right now under discussion. We have got a team of academics drawn from IIT Madras, IIT Bhilai, IIT Bombay, IISc Bangalore, and so on. So they are kind of in regular dialogue amongst each other first, and then with us. And we've been also holding dialogues with industry, people who are practitioners in the field of blockchain and other technologies. So this is just one of these solutions which is possible. So as I said, we have to define the big picture goals that we are aspiring for. To reach that, there are multiple paths which are possible, and yes, distributed ledger technology is one such path. Whether we end up finally taking that path or choose
something else
is yet to be seen.
Okay. Shilpa?
We have this question from Nitish Dalvi. You talked about the hardware part in the remote voting. Can you please share more details on the same?
So, the current electronic voting machine, as you are aware, has got a ballot unit and a control unit and a VVPAT machine, which is linked together. And the vote ultimately gets stored on the control unit, and which is finally, on the day of counting, you press a button and then the count starts. In a remote kind of a scenario, there are fundamental differences. One is that we are talking about, if at all we are storing data, we should have capability of storing data of multiple constituencies onto that device. That's number one. Number two, as I said, you need a dynamic ballot paper, so we should be able to generate based on certain authentication and not a fixed ballot paper on a ballot unit. Thirdly, it should have the ability to talk to a network and transmit data. Whether it does so synchronously or asynchronously is another question, but sending in, and it should have capability of encrypting it and sending it onto that network. So there are differences between the existing setup and a remote voting hardware setup.
Even in the system, it's possible to have a paper slip kind of falling into the bottom, or it's going to make it very complicated?
Yeah, so as I said that, right now we are talking about a laboratory experiment and a research project. And certainly we don't want to deviate dramatically from a process which is currently in vogue. So we would try to replicate it as far as practicable from a voter experience point of view, the existing framework. But let us see how the design evolves.
Okay. One question from Saurabh. Can you take us through what you envision the process of remote voting will be like from start to end?
Okay, so, first of all, somebody who is, let me give an example. Somebody is a voter in Delhi wanting to vote in Bombay for Delhi election. He would need to give an application in some form, online, offline, whatever, that I don't want to vote from my parent polling station, but from another city. At which stage the parent electoral roll will need to get marked that this guy is not coming to this polling station, so there is no possibility of impersonation.
Okay.
And then you create a database of remote voters, of who is voting from where, which city. And this information naturally also has to be available in a public domain to political parties, because in any case, they know which voter is linked to which polling station. So they should know that this guy, if he's not voting from here, which city is he voting from? So first is creation of a segmented database of such voters. Second is a tool for authentication. When I am going to Bombay and I am producing myself with some kind of an ID, I need an authentication that yes, I am the guy who has registered for such an exercise. And the ballot which is relevant to my constituency should get generated onto that hardware. Third is the hardware itself. As I mentioned earlier, I've explained to you on that. The fourth is the software application which will run for the process of voting and transmission of data onto a network. And finally, the network design is another component of the whole problem. And then an application to decrypt the data at the other end and then count the votes. Yeah, so broadly that is it.
Okay. Mr. Kumar, you want to add anything? Some final words?
I think my colleague has covered that particular part because he's the custodian of that particular information.
Okay. Shilpa, are you there? Because I can't see you. Shilpa had a question, I think. 1 second. Okay. Okay. There's a question from Shankar. Is there a scope for expanding the postal ballot system for migrant voters?
Yeah, so I think my colleague is best suited to answer that question. He's the one who is the legal mind of the commission.
Okay.
See, postal ballot facilities, you would be aware that last year, after gaining the experience of 2019, generally Commission constituted different working groups to look at various aspects of electoral process. And one of the suggestions was related to extending the facility of this, you can say, absentee voting instead of just naming postal ballot kind of thing, to other categories of electors. In fact, the law prescribes a kind of provision which says that a class or category of electors can be considered for a postal ballot voting. But if they opt for that, they cannot vote at the level of polling station. So this is the legal frame of this particular thing. Basing on this particular situation, last year, September 2019, Commission recommended to Law Ministry that we would like to add certain categories for extending these facilities in a particular manner. And in that particular, we identified 3 categories. One was related to age related, which is above 80 years of age. It means we were targeting the senior citizen in that sense. And then the persons with disabilities who are already marked on our electoral roll to avoid any kind of mischief. And the third category, which was very interesting category, that electors who are employed in essential services. So this is the first time this particular thing came up. And on 22nd of October 2019, this was notified by Law Ministry. And we implemented the pilot in pilot mode in Jharkhand in select ACs. For senior citizen and for PWD, and in Delhi for all 3 categories. And in current Bihar elections, again, in all these 3 categories, this facility is extended. Now, how it works, for first 2 categories, for senior citizen and postal, this PWD, we don't dispatch anything or receive anything through postal department. It's a basically dedicated polling team which goes to their home, delivers it, collects it, and it's a kind of system which has been created where everything is safe, secure, and it's also the political parties, candidates are informed, informed this kind of thing. So it's a term is postal ballot, but actually it is a home delivery and home receipt also of the vote.
Interesting.
But in terms of essential services, we have given the option called early voting, which is the term which is used in most of the democracies world over. It means you would be knowing that our election duty staff, including security personnel, they are doing early voting today. It means they vote at least, say, 3 days before the poll, something like that. So it's a kind of voter facilitation center where they come, and it's in the presence of all the candidates or their representatives, and they do their postal ballot voting. So these particular categories of essential service electors, which in case of Bihar this time, we have close to 30 categories like that.
Okay.
So, of different nature, something like that. And this particular category can apply in advance, because you need to apply in advance so that your credentials are checked, because there is a system of verification of those so that it should not be misused. And then you are allowed to vote in these dedicated centers. So you have to come out and vote, so that there is a different kind of checking. Since first two categories are already identified in our roles, so there is a different kind of a scrutiny already done. In this particular category, you require different kind of scrutiny. Now, adding to this particular list is a kind of, which is the question, basically the how you can
Migrant
expand
workers.
the scope. So how do you define a particular category? That is the critical element. Who is a if we talk about migrant, so what is the meaning of migrant? To be classified as a particular category, who moves for a work for 1 year, 3 months, 1 day, somebody is away. So how do you define this particular category? This is going to be the key challenge in that particular sense. We have started our work. We have started expanding the scope of these categories, and let's see when things become more refined in that sense, more filtered, then more and more categories, because categories have to be a particular class which is always identifiable and not questionable. That is very important.
Okay. Very, very interesting. Didn't realize you're doing all this work. Okay. Shilpa, anything else?
No more questions in the queue, sir.
Yeah, it's okay. 1 hour we had. Great. Thank you so much. I mean, I personally have learned a lot today. Very interesting work. Mr. Kundra, you also clarified a lot of things for our participants. I think they'll have a much clearer idea on the kind of solution they should be working on. Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar. Thank you, Mr. Kundra. Great talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.